Jonathan, I will be right back. I'll be here.
Okay. Let me just make sure that all the connections are as they should be. If you can hear me on Facebook Live, we are making sure that everything's connecting up correctly. Had some issues earlier with some connection problems, so I hope that you can be patient with us while we're getting all of this together. Very thankful to have each of you who are interested in listening to this conversation tonight, and give everybody just a few minutes to make sure that we are connected correctly. No, I've had a few trying to message me and make sure that we're going to be on, so apologize for that. I know sometimes the live feed on these special broadcasts can be a little difficult, but looks like everything is connecting as it should be. So give everybody just a few moments to make sure that we have everything we need to connect. Looks like we're doing so. So all that looks good. Okay. All right. I think we've had just a couple of minutes to make sure everything is good and live, and I hope that looks like it's working properly. So, okay, I want to welcome everybody to the Legion of Heretics podcast. It's a podcast ministry of Holston Primitive Baptist Universalist Church, located here in the beautiful mountains of Rogersville, Tennessee. Of course, our purpose is to promote dialogue and encourage meaningful conversations that create space for church leaders in various settings to exchange ideas and share challenges. Our focus, of course, is always on clarity, healing, and strategy of doing so. Today, we're excited to be joined by our good friend and brother, Michael Miano. Michael is a dynamic speaker, a tireless advocate for peace, father of two beautiful children, and husband to the great and powerful Rashonda Miano. So glad to have Michael on with us. Proud to call him my friend, and excited for our conversation tonight on a very essential, very timely subject of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and glad to have his insight as we get into this conversation. Glad that you've tuned in, those of you who are listening by Facebook Live. Thankful for you being with us. Each time that we've touched on this subject the last few weeks, I wanted to remind everybody of a great podcast from my good friend Tom Woods, the Tom Woods Show. It's one of the leading libertarian podcasts out there, and he has on his good friend Brent McGuire, who's a Lutheran minister and an expert in, of course, the theological background as well for what's going on in Israel and Palestine. So I would invite you to listen to that resource. It's really good. Tom's a great interviewer, and Reverend McGuire does a great job explaining the ins and outs, what's going on theologically there. And also want to mention that anything you can get your hands on by Abby Martin is worth listening to. She's been doing this for years. She was doing this when it wasn't fashionable to do it, but she's did in-person interviews with Palestinians in Gaza over the past 10, 15 years, and has done one of the best jobs that you can find when it comes to what's going on with boots on the ground and actually talking to real people. So I invite you to, of course, listen to anything that she's doing, especially Palestine 101 on YouTube. Of course, again, want to welcome Pastor Michael Miano. He is pastor of the Blue Point Bible Church in Blue Point, New York. This is his wonderful family. Of course, Rashonda and his two children. And of course, this is the Blue Point Bible Church. I'm sure they'd invite everyone that would like to be with them. If you're in Long Island, if you're on vacation, or if you're just wanting to go just see what Long Island's like, I know they'd be really glad to have you. And they're a wonderful congregation. Of course, Mike has out 3 books I wanted to make mention of. He has one called "Freaked Out by the New Covenant." Of course, his newest book came out, "Full Preterism," the book proclaiming the presence, purpose of God. And of course, his really good book, "Wicked," which I have a copy of. I want to get the copy of "Full Preterism" as soon as I can. It's on my to-do list, so I will be getting that done, getting several copies and getting those handed out. So glad to have Michael with us. Of course, he participated in some events in Washington, D.C. I'm hoping he can tell us more about that as we go along. But here's some pictures of Michael with some other church leaders, some other religious leaders in Washington, D.C., here at the Capitol, of course, in front of the White House. So I know he'll be sharing that with us. And Michael's been personally involved in efforts to work toward peace in the Middle East. And that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. So I want Michael to just go ahead and bring him in, let him tell us about his experiences there. Of course, lots of you that are listening know Michael, you know his personal faith and his background and those sorts of things, but we really wanted to focus tonight on his experiences while he was there in the Middle East, connections he has now with those that he knows of in the region, and things that we can be doing locally to promote peace in not just here, but in every community that we're in, but especially what we can do to promote peace there in the Middle East. So, Michael, good to have you. Want to bring you in, and you go ahead and start us off with what you'd like to talk about, maybe about your experiences and what got you into that, and look forward to it.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. That was a great introduction. You're a very gracious host here. Of course, I was looking forward to joining with you. And, I do want to remind those that might be viewing this that previously on one of your programs here, you had Mike Cornett share a bit about the Israel-Palestinian region, the history of the region. And I very much appreciated that. And I want to encourage folks back to that in review. And also, being that you mentioned Tom Wood's program there, I look forward to leaning in on that because, as you mentioned, the goal, while our media is talking about this constantly, no matter what news network you go to, or even sometimes social programs that you go to on TV, are all really focused in on this topic. And something that you said that I really want to hold to tonight is getting to know the stories on the ground, folks that are there, not our perspective of their story or whatever twist some sort of media network wants to use, but rather listening and learning from them, the people that are there, living in occupation, living through this situation that we're seeing now, which I would call a crisis. And yeah, so I really want to appreciate the resources you've already mentioned and brought up. And I say all of that because this conversation is very nuanced, as you know. There's so many different ways we could go about talking about the situation. We would say, as I mentioned, we can listen to the stories and know the stories, and that's what I'm hoping to lean us in on a bit tonight. Is what I had called in 2010 when I visited that region, "Know the Faces," and I want to share some of those stories with you, so that you might leave our programming tonight saying, "I know the faces. I know my family in Palestine." And then, of course, there's other ways of looking at this conversation about the historical ignorance that we see in our society, gaining knowledge and undoing false knowledge regarding this, and many have gone about doing that, and I want to appreciate these different ways of going about the conversation. Then, of course, there's biblical and historical understandings of Israel and what it is to be a Jew and the land promises that were given to Abraham. And just the other day, I was privileged to be with Ward Fenley on NCMI Live, and that was sort of the way the conversation went. Was we talked more about what it means to be a Jew. What did the Apostle Paul talk about in the book of Romans and the theological ideas behind that. And then, of course, there's the historical knowledge of the land, which Mike Cornett, I thought, did a great job of bringing us in on. Then there's the political and cultural reality of what's going on in the land now, which a lot of our news networks and different news networks are focused on. And then you might say there's the biblical Christian understanding and response of being peacemakers. Blessed are the peacemakers. And I hope out of all of those different nuances that this conversation might have, I hope tonight to truly tell some of the stories and to speak to the Christians that are here listening to this program, especially, but all people that have goodwill, that we would work toward peace in the ways that we can. And I believe that starts with having an attitude, a posture of peace, that actually wants to listen and learn and discern together. Let us reason together, to borrow that statement from Scripture, and and then of course to put our faith into practice. And even if you're the atheist with common goodwill, you can put your faith into practice by listening to the stories and learning. So again, I want to double back to appreciating you and appreciating the resources that you mentioned. And yes, so about 2 weeks ago, I had the privilege of joining with an organization, another resource, if you will, is Churches for Middle East Peace. And they held a prayer vigil at the White House. And our goal was to simply pray for the elected officials, pray for our society, pray for the variety, excuse me, pray for the variety of different influences in this conversation. And there's a lot of them, so we spent some time there. And as you know, I have an affinity for Shane Claiborne and his ministry. So it was great to be there with him and share and, chat a bit with him about ways that we could possibly get him to visit us here in New York. And I bring him up every time I talk about this because Shane Claiborne was the influence for me back in 2010 to go with the Christian peacemaker teams to the West Bank. We went all over. Started in Jerusalem, wandered down to the Negev, visited with Bedouins there. I'll share some of that here with you in a moment. Then we wandered up to the West Bank, and then we even wandered in on some settlements and talked with settlers and learned a little bit more about their perspective of things, and then spent the remainder of our time either in the West Bank or in Jerusalem, meeting with various organizations and so forth. So, and again, the goal was to simply know the faces. And as I went there with an organization. I'll share with you here a little bit from the report that was put out by my team back in November 2010. Inspired by the gospel of peace, announced and inaugurated by Jesus Christ, our delegation members made the journey to gain a better understanding of the conflict between Israelis and Palestinians, to support movements toward nonviolent resolutions of the conflict, to reduce violence by providing an international presence in conflict areas, and to identify ways in which delegation members and their faith communities might support the work of nonviolent peacemaking. In order to pursue these goals, we had to travel extensively in East Jerusalem and the West Bank, participating with several public actions, meeting with representatives of numerous organizations, Palestinian and Israeli, working for a nonviolent resolution of a conflict that has caused so much suffering over the years and continues to pose a serious threat to world peace. In the course of these activities, delegation members enjoyed many opportunities to ask questions and obtain answers about the wall, the Israeli occupation of the Palestinian territories, and other aspects of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. One of the key questions we asked, which you would expect of us, of those that we met with, was what can we do to support the work that you are doing? Again, because there's a lot, contrary to popular opinion, there's a lot of efforts toward peace happening in that region. And we asked, how can we support what you are doing? And the most common response we received was, go home and tell others what you have saw here. And again, that's why I've been reaching out and hoping to obtain opportunities to interview and talk with folks, because that's what was simply asked of us. And among one of the most important things we heard during our time was the story of Palestinians who continue to suffer from Israeli oppression. Many of these stories, not surprisingly, date back to the origins of the current Israeli-Palestinian conflict in 1947, 1949 period of time, when the modern nation of Israel was established on land that was already inhabited by Palestinians. And some 800,000 of these Palestinians were driven out of their homes and off their lands and forced to become refugees. And I do want to say this at the outset, Jonathan, you know my mind and heart in this discussion. I don't endeavor to take a political position. I'm not trying to be pro-Palestinian or pro-Israeli for that matter. Rather, I'm simply being pro-humanity. And, if I was alive during the time of Richard Wurmbrand, I would have been standing against the communists on behalf of the Christians in Romania. If I was alive during Nazi Germany, I would have been standing with my brother Dietrich Bonhoeffer helping and aiding Jews from the ills of the Third Reich. Being that I'm alive right now, we're alive right now. This is something that demands our attention and willingness to learn and discern a little bit about. And that's the goal. So I don't want to ever come off. And, I have carried the Palestinian flag because I believe these are people in crisis. And when there's a certain group of people in crisis, there's nothing wrong with saying these people deserve, the limelight, if you will, or these lives matter, to borrow that popular slogan that was being used years ago. So in sharing, if you don't mind, I'll share a couple pictures here so that you actually literally can know the faces. One of the faces I would introduce you to is a woman named Cedar, Cedar Dubai. If you look here on this picture, there's me on the far right with the red hat, and the organization I went with, CPT, that's what they're referred to in the land as the Red Hats. We were the people that always have a CPT hat. When I had went in 2010, the organization was called Christian Peacemaker Teams. They have since, for a variety of different reasons, renamed to the Community Peacemaker Teams. Some would say, I like your Christ. I don't like those that represent him. I think borrowing from Gandhi there, paraphrasing, of course. But so understanding the name change. Either way, that's me on the far right or far left, depending on how this looks on a screen. Then you have my brother Jeff. He's a preacher from Canada that was there from the UCC denomination. He was actually my partner during that period of time. We would, after listening to some of these stories, you need time to decompress and share. And this was the brother that I would pray with and share and talk with. And then Cedar is the woman sitting next to him. And then I'm not remembering my brother Dallas. That was his wife there. She was actually pregnant on our team and serving there. So it shows anyone can go ahead and work toward peace in whatever, whether you're pregnant, whether, there were folks that were disabled that were there. And each of these people felt inclined to learn more about this conflict. And again, I want to remind folks, this wasn't after October 7th. This was in 2010, November 2010. Folks were talking about the need for peacemaking efforts in the Israeli-Palestinian region, lest we think that, all of a sudden something happened on October 7th, and now these are becoming popular conversations. They've been popular discussions. So Cedar hosted our visit to a place called the Sabeel Ecumenical Liberation Theological Center in Jerusalem. She had worked there for many years to promote peace. In 1948, the year of the Arab-Israeli War, that the Palestinians called the Al-Nakba, this phrase means the catastrophe, Cedar was living with her family in Haifa. The family was Anglican Christian, and until that time, they had been living in peace with their Jewish and Muslim neighbors. But in 1948, with the arrival of the Israeli military, that peace was shattered. Cedar and her family were terrified when they heard the sounds of gunfire in their once quiet neighborhood, and even more so when they had heard that the Israeli military threatened non-Jews who did not flee these massacres, or that they would be massacred. Knowing that the Israeli military had already massacred other Palestinians, notably in the village of Deir Yassin, Cedar and her family fled their home and joined the ranks of the refugees. To this day, her childhood home is inhabited by an Israeli family. In light of this story, it would be easy to understand if Cedar had been overcome with bitterness, but this has not been her path. Instead, choosing the way of compassionate love, she has spent many years helping Sabeel Theological Ecumenical Center to promote readings of the Gospels and biblical texts that allow Palestinian Christians like her to hear the message of liberation, justice, and peace. And unfortunately, as much as I do, Jonathan, that in our Western context, a lot of times our theological rhetoric can come off violent. And in many cases, we're seeing this being highlighted now, comes off anti-Palestinian, where, the Zionist ideology surely is saying, the Palestinians have no place and are a sort of false people, if you will. And, and I've heard that conversation go both ways, which I think needs to be we need to learn how to be a bit more delicate. And I even say that to myself. So Cedar here, she focuses on helping Palestinians run against this Western idea of militarism, of violent readings of the scriptures, of us versus them mentalities. And we would agree that such readings need to grapple with the difficult historical truth that Cedar expresses when she tells us, the slaves of the Pharaoh are my Pharaoh. Netanyahu is my Pharaoh. And that's a direct quote from this woman as she's sitting there suffering. And unfortunately, that was in 2010. I don't know. I did talk to one organization I'll mention here is Sami Awad. He has an organization called the Holy Land Trust. And I'm not quite sure that I have a picture of his organization. They are located in Bethlehem. And I think most of us are familiar with the city of Bethlehem. I might share this with you here. In order to get to Bethlehem, the city of where our Lord was born, in order to get there, you have to go through checkpoints and you have to go through these long lines. You see us, some of my team here, we have smiles on me, not so much. The gentleman behind me, not so much. We're not very happy with these long lines that you have to go through. And then as we move forward, what they're going to do is they're going to ask the Arabs on the line with us to move to another side of the line. And they're just going to antagonize them and give them a hard time. So, again, here's us going to the city of Bethlehem through one of these checkpoints. And there we met with a man named Sami Awad. And he's on Facebook. I follow him, and I've been watching. I know he had family suffering in Gaza. And I'll tell you a little bit about him. And then if you have any questions or anything, Jonathan, I'll take a breath here. But what I would say is Sami, again, nonviolent Palestinian founder of this organization called the Holy Land Trust. It's an organization that promotes nonviolent resistance to Israel's occupation of Palestinian territories. A young man in his 40s, Sami had yet to be born in 1948, yet his story too begins that year. His family was living in Jerusalem when war broke out between the Israelis and the Arabs. Desiring to protect his family from the fighting in Jerusalem, Sami's grandfather had attempted to place a white flag on their home. While he was on the roof, he was shot and killed by an Israeli sniper. The fighting was so intense that the rest of his family had to wait 2 days before retrieving his body. Shortly thereafter, they fled to the relative safety of Bethlehem, where they began to live life as refugees. Since the mother of the family could not afford to support all of her children, Sami's father was sent to live in an orphanage in Jerusalem. From the vantage point of the orphanage where he grew up, he would watch the coming and goings of Jewish families that had moved into his former home. Sami's story, much like Cedar's, would make it easy to understand if he had become resentful and desirous of revenge. Sami's good humor, however, makes it clear that that is not his way. Instead, inspired by the witness of his uncle, Mubarak Awad, founder of the Palestinian Center for the Study of Nonviolence, Sami has chosen, through his organization, the Holy Land Trust, to promote nonviolent resistance to the occupation, citing historical examples of such resistance in the Palestinian territories, which is very important because we don't hear a lot about that. We hear about violence of Hamas, which, again, we need to have a great disdain for, or the violence of the Israeli military, but we don't realize that there's so many Palestinians and Israelis that are working toward peace. Sami shared with our members his belief in acts of nonviolent resistance have the power to sustain the hopes of the Palestinian people, to soften the hearts of the Israeli occupiers, and thus help create conditions for a just peace between the two people. And I know I said I was going to take a breath, but if you don't mind, I just want to mention one more organization. The other organization that we met with when we journeyed back to Jerusalem was a group called ICAD, and it was the Israeli Commission Against House Demolitions. And there we met with different Israelis who were explaining, the problem with the two-state solution, the problem with obviously demolitions that were happening. And I'll share a brief, another picture here, sad one at that. Let's see here. Here on the screen, you're going to see a picture of a man standing on his former home. This is what unfortunately gets done to homes. They bulldoze them. And he was showing us, and in the rubble, if you were to see, I actually have the photograph that was taken when I went to Israel. They told us not to take any digital cameras or anything like that, because unfortunately, when you're leaving through the airport, if the IDF or any of the the security at the airport see pictures that they don't like, or that the media does not want necessarily to be portrayed, they'll destroy your camera and your stuff. So it's best to have a disposable camera. That way my pictures were able to be retained. So here you have a man standing on top of his house, and what they would do is they brought us out to this desert here, and we were able to just witness and talk with these different families that have suffered, and even in some of the pictures, I'm not sure if I have one here. You can see the water canisters were demolished. This was an interesting one here. They walked us through their graveyard, showing us, well, our ancestors are buried here. I know everyone keeps saying that this belongs to them. My great great grandfather is buried right over there, and this is in the Negev here, where I'm showing you pictures from the Sinai Peninsula, and there, just for laughs, is the picture of my team. That's us standing on top of one of the houses. Again, something most folks, when they read their Bible, they fail to notice that Jesus said, "Do not go, do not go on to, what is it? If you're on your rooftop, do not go down into the house." Most folks don't realize that most time is spent in the Middle East on the rooftop. And there we were, taking a picture. I'm right there in the middle. You can see my arrow, my coffee cup. Folks that know me know I'm always holding a coffee cup. And yeah, so again, there were a lot of great organizations that we had the privilege to meet with. I mentioned a couple here now, Sabeel Theological Center, and then also Holy Land Trust and the Israeli Committee Against House Demolitions. So there's a lot of effort toward peace in the land. I hope that's something that we're seeing right here at the outset of the discussion.
No, this is great. It gives us a lot of insight into, like you say, connecting to the people that are actually there. These stories, they're the most powerful testimonies as to what's going on, because it does get oftentimes movements of peace get lost in the politics, and then rhetoric starts. I noticed this I remember when there was much more distrust of Muslims or anybody that looked differently during the Bush administration. And again, it's not throwing stones at any political party or whatever, because at least in my perspective, I have little trust for any political party, especially the rhetoric that comes from them. But I just remember all the distrust, hatred, these sorts of things, and then experiencing that again during the last few years with how that the Black Lives Matter movement started off as something I think that was just directed toward, hey, can police just not shoot first and ask questions later? But then it morphed into Proud Boys on one side of the right and Antifa on the other, and nobody could be reasonable in the middle, because you had to have these violent outbreaks of either side. So I would have friends and neighbors have these violent reactions. You couldn't even mention BLM or Proud Boys or whatever side that you were just trying to be reasonable about, to say, hey, not everybody is wanting the worst of mankind, and not everybody wants to take violent action against people. So that's what gets lost sometimes in these heated discussions. Again, this is why a few weeks ago that I had on Reverend Tiffany Sapp from the Holston Valley Unitarian Universalist Church, because this is what it takes in order for us to calm down and start talking to one another. Is religious leaders like ourselves, we're trying to model what we'd like to see happen, and of course enact these values that you're talking about, is working toward peace without getting worked up over the names of something that the news organizations or the political rhetoric machines, the propaganda machines, will take these and wind up causing neighbor to fight against neighbor, or to just, like I said, I had friends here locally in our area that would get so riled up over things that they had absolutely no control over, whether or not Black Lives Matter people were living in luxury and they were just using this organization, or you had Proud Boys, were they all Nazis and hated Black people? No, I mean, it's so I say it's the insanity of it all. So you have, in this same vein, extreme pro-Israelis that if you mention from the river to the sea, they get just violently angry with you and call you anti-Semitic and everything else, for just even mentioning, like, hey, maybe there's Palestinians that aren't wanting the extermination of all Jews, like you say. And as you're saying, Hamas, um, is the cause for violence, and so it's not the Palestinian people themselves that are wanting this violence to take place. I mean, and again, I don't know that they have even the ability to enact much violence or how much weaponry that they have access to. That's why it's so important for us to just not get so wrapped up into the rhetoric we're hearing from all the talking heads, um, from all the normal sources that want you to take their side. It's to their benefit for you to jump on their side and hate the other when we're doing something I think it's much more difficult, which is trying to work toward peace, and working toward peace is not an easy prospect. Like you say, men like Shane Claiborne gets names hurled at him that I don't think are worthy of what he's what he's all about. You have people that just have a vitriol for what Shane is doing, and he's doing nothing more than just advocating for peace across all religious lines. So it's why it's important, I think, that for you have organizations like you're talking about, churches from Middle East Peace. There's UCC churches. There's lots of mainline churches that would be considered progressive to liberal, and oftentimes you'll have conservative fundamentalist churches that just absolutely refuse to go outside the bounds of their walled walled circles. But this is the difficult thing we're trying to do. And this is why it's so important for us to have these conversations. It's like you've been there, even before the recent conflict, you see all the issues, and it's complicated and it's messy, but the world never gets any better until we go in and get our hands dirty and through our efforts try to promote peace. So I so thankful for what you have done, and of course what we're working on now. So I guess that's where I'd like for us to go. Maybe it's good to have those experiences. You bring so much insight to the conversation. Where do you think we are now, and where could we move forward? I mean, is it more about being a part of organizations like Churches for Middle East Peace, or what are you seeing, and what would you recommend?
I appreciate a lot of what you just shared there, and I want to say that um, something I had shared on the program I was on the other day was that I've gained a real strong disdain for titles, and you've talked with me before, and in one sense I love titles because they help clarify positions and details. I'm one that's always saying I'm a preterist, and I know a lot of preterists are always saying I don't really call myself a preterist, and I get frustrated. So I love titles, but then on the flip side of that, I know that I myself, I navigate I weave in and out of what, these designations people want to put upon me, these titles. So during this period of time, namely since October, I've really gained just a frustration with, all the political titles you could think of. Even the religious titles become somewhat frustrating because I don't believe because someone identifies as a Muslim that their life is any less worthy than me. I don't believe that because you interact. I'll even say this: I don't believe that because you interact with a Muslim who might believe in violence as a means to achieve things, that just because you interact with them or them, that your life needs to be at risk, or that you should your life is any less worthy than everyone else's. So it's really become somewhat frustrating with the titles and so forth. And something I'll say this: I believe that we need to have a disposition of peace. It has to start with us. We have to say, I want to do the work, and the work, how much work does that look like? We're sitting around, we're enjoying coffee, and we're listening to each other. There's
It's violent.
right?
It's horrible.
In this picture,
Sorry, I couldn't resist. It's like, oh, how can these people even laugh or get along?
yeah, right. I know, and you see there's smiles on people's
But
faces. You have
yeah,
Muslims here. You have a man from Canada. You have a woman from Canada. You have a man from Scotland. You have a woman from Germany. all here together, and a bunch of Muslims living in the West Bank that were willing to talk with each other. And, I did hear some very sad stories that evening sitting in that living room where I'm at there. I heard about the massacre of the Al Ibrahimi Mosque. I've heard a lot of horrible things that night, and we were able to talk with one another. And I will say that there were some folks here in this room that do believe in violent resistance and do believe that, the situation is not going to change otherwise. Some other work that, we participated in. So right there, having a disposition of peace and being willing to listen to one another, admitting that we have differences. I might say meditation. This is me at the a Tent of Nations, an organization where they're, unfortunately, the Israeli occupation is really trying to encroach upon their property there. I went there and listened to his story, and here I am just kind of praying in the court field, just, thinking about these things. And right there, that's another answer to your question, Jonathan. We need to think about these things. So we need to have a disposition of peace. We need to be willing to listen to one another. We need to be willing to think these things through. I know I'm not the only one in the last couple of days on social media that I hate seeing some of the pictures that I see. It's, and sometimes I'm like, man, I don't know why I follow this person. But if they're going to share such things, but we need to think about it. We need to see it. We need to admit that this is something that cannot be, it cannot be okay with us. And then here's a picture of me working, helping build a road, and we can build roads literally, and we can build roads metaphorically, and we'll build roads of unity together. We can build roads that help each other. Here we're helping them build a road so they can get to work. We could do that again, literally and metaphorically. And there's so many different things that we could be doing. And I do want to highlight that oppression and violence, for that matter, whether it's Israeli violence or Palestinian orchestrated violence, it breeds four different main attitudes that I saw when I was there in the land. The first two are what we've already discussed here, and that would be violence. You're violent to me, eye for an eye. I'm going to come and be violent to you. Then there's nonviolence, which those of us who follow after Christ, and we believe blessed are the peacemakers, Jesus's words, then we believe in nonviolence. And those two attitudes, as I mentioned, were very prevalent there. However, the two other attitudes that I saw, one was ignorance. We visited with a woman in a settlement. I'll share her story here. A Jewish woman living in one of the Israeli settlements in East Jerusalem. She had been born in the United States. She was raised as a Quaker in her mother's tradition. Then they immigrated to Israel, and she converted to Judaism. Then her life in Israel took a tragic turn some years ago when her son was murdered by a Palestinian gunman who attacked the yeshiva that he was studying at. And then she alerted us to the significant role that fear of the enemy plays within the settlement. So unfortunately, this woman didn't know much about the history of the land. She knows that she lived in America. They came to Israel, and they don't know why these Arab people, I don't know why these Arab people hate us. And we have to live in these little encampments or settlements. Again, she had a very different idea of the land that we had been leaning in on and learning. So it was strange. So I say, some folks don't know what they're involved in. And again, her hurt was very real as her son was murdered and was caught up in this violence. But then unfortunately now, this continues to perpetuate her misunderstanding regarding what's actually happening in the land. And then the fourth one that I saw was frustration. And that's everywhere, whether you're talking to nonviolent resistance, whether you're talking to those obviously of violent resistance, or if you're talking to the Israeli military. We had an Israeli military man walk up to us while we were holding signs. And I thought I had the picture uploaded here. I don't believe I do. But we had an Israeli soldier walk up to us. Mine was in Arabic, and it said, "End the occupation." And then the gentleman that was with me from Sweden, he had a picture that in Hebrew that said, "End the occupation." And the soldier came up to us, and he basically, he wanted to voice his objection to our stance, of course. And then he spoke respectfully. So that's something I want to highlight, give him credit on that. And he listened to what we had to say. But when we shared with him, we just met with a woman named Cedar. Like we weren't telling him any rhetoric from our organization. We were telling him real life situations. We told him about Cedar. We told him about Sammy, who had been driven from their homes. He insisted, and this is a direct quote, not one Arab was forced to leave Israel. Any Arabs who left did so willingly. Again, and he seemed very angry, respectful but angry, and did not believe that we should be there, and felt that we were, uh, you know, disrupting the peace that was there in the land, which, as you go out and you journey into the West Bank and other territories, there is no peace there for these folks. They're suffering. So again, I share all of that to say that there were a variety of mentalities there. And as I'm sure you know, and even more recently, I've been reading some news articles. There's a variety of attitudes today. We have a local newspaper, Newsday, here on Long Island. And just recently, there was an article that was shared. I'll pull it out here. It was called Interfaith Bonds Tested. And unfortunately, it was talking about how communities here on Long Island that have worked together, the Jewish and the Muslim community in times past, are now kind of fracturing in their united efforts. And then one woman, a Jewish woman, had mentioned how during one of her family dinners, she brought up the suffering of the Palestinians, and her house like kind of shouted her down, and didn't even let her speak. And I share that because there's folks that are trying to have conversations in the midst of this, but it shows that there needs to be a lot more work. So it's happening though, and then that's the neat thing. So again, I just wanted to share from that newsletter. They had said that what we need to do is find ways. We need to strategize in ways to talk about this topic, and that's why tonight I'm hoping that I've just encouraged us toward listening a little bit more to the stories, knowing and learning the stories of people, which again was my heart in going there. And then as I went there and I saw, one of the efforts, by the way, I know you made the joke about the picture, of sitting there in a room with a bunch of Muslim folks and having conversations. How dare we? One of the other efforts of making peace that we had to do in the land was to walk children to school, which should sadden us. So why would a bunch of international missionaries have to walk children to school? And something that's happening that's very big there, and I'll share one last picture here. What's happening there is the settlers attack the children, and then the children, being children, will throw rocks back. And if you look here down toward the bottom of the picture, this is us escorting some of the children walking. That day, obviously, they knew that we were going to be there with them, so they brought signs and flags, and that way they can, have their moment of safe protest, rather than, kids being kids. When a settler comes and throws a rock at you, what do? You pick up a rock and throw it back. And then unfortunately, the Israeli military shows up. Now it becomes a political issue, or now your children can unfortunately be labeled as terrorists. And I think we've noticed in the more recent days, I know someone had said to me, they said, well, how many Palestinian children does Israel have? Because they keep saying, well, they released this many hostages, they traded this many hostages. And I don't know if folks are really paying attention. Ask yourself, well, why do they have so many children under arrest, children and women under arrest? And that's what we were really endeavoring against here. And, I will share just a short story. You talk about, what could we be doing, and different efforts. So this is a picture here on the screen of a woman named Rachel Corrie. Rachel Corrie, unfortunately, was killed by the Israeli IDF in the middle of a protest. She was there with an organization that was chaining themselves to homes to protest the demolitions. This is long before I had went back in 2010. And there are unfortunately video clips. I'm one of those people that subjects myself to some of these strange videos that I wish I wouldn't. However, I did watch the video clip of, unfortunately, a bulldozer bulldozing right over her in the midst of a protest. And here was an American, again, that international presence, seeking to serve as a missionary. So I share her story. That is probably if you feel called to go to Israel, and right now, obviously, that's a little bit different of a situation. I'm pretty sure they've banned visas at this point. However, in the future, let's face it, I don't know if you've seen the pictures, but I have. They're going to need missionaries. They're going to need help. If you feel called to be a missionary, take a look at this woman. Be inspired that there are those that are called to do this work. However, each of us can be missionaries in our own right by simply committing to a disposition of peace, committing to listening to one another, especially when we know people are suffering. Do everything we can to put our ear close to them. The ear of the Lord is close to the cry of the brokenhearted. We need to be a people that are discerning that. And I will just share one last point here and respond to maybe any questions you might have or anything else you might want me to share. This year in Bethlehem, they've decided to cancel Christmas. They are not doing any religious services. I know you had mentioned that one of the interviewees on one of the on Tom's podcast there, I'm forgetting his last name, Tom Woods, I believe it was, correct?
Yeah. Yes.
Tom Woods interviewing a Lutheran pastor. Well, a pastor that I've gotten to know over the last couple of weeks is a pastor from Bethlehem named Dr. Reverend Munther Isaac, and he's from a Lutheran congregation there in Bethlehem. And they've canceled all services for Christmas, all joyous celebrations. They are doing, I believe, a ceasefire candlelit ceremony. And what he's done this year is instead of putting Jesus in the manger, he put Jesus in the rubble. He took a bunch of rocks of rubble and then put Jesus in the rubble to highlight what our Lord said. And he said that what we do to the least of these, we've done to him. And if we're not asking ourselves, do I have a disposition of peace? If we're not asking ourselves, am I thinking about this? Am I paying attention to the atrocities that are happening to people? And am I searching myself to ask, how do I walk worthy of the calling God has given me? Because again, I think each of us are called in different ways. So I hope that what I've just shared gave you some inspiration to conjure up or to think about what your calling might be in this regard.
No, I appreciate all that, Mike, because again, you have the unique perspective and insight, and you have an authoritative voice when it comes to these matters because you've been there, boots on the ground. And I've known you as a person who is, like I said in the beginning, you're a tireless advocate for peace and reconciliation. So it's important. So it's important to have these conversations, get to have this sort of dialogue. Of course, we'll just sort of close out by talking about the fact that churches can play a significant role in peace efforts. Of course, by engaging in initiatives that promote understanding, reconciliation, justice. One of the greatest things that we can do, and we've mentioned, is interfaith dialogue. And that's not just between two different kind of Baptists. That's between Christians, Jews, Muslims. Because again, I remember when in the 80s, growing up in the 80s, like I did, Muslims were just seen as sort of an oddity, but they were seen as interesting and just unique. But then after 9/11, there's all this hatred. There's patriotic songs about the Statue of Liberty shaking her fist at the rest of the world, and we're going to kick butt. And you made us bleed. We're going to make you. We're going to kill you. We'll bomb the deserts and turn it into glass and all this. We had politicians standing on stage, and one politician, and not just because I'm partial, but one politician named Ron Paul dared to stand on the Republican stage and say, we've made this mess with our foreign policy, and it was booed off the stage by his own constituency. So that sort of told you where we were as a culture when it comes to that. And I even had personal friends of mine that I know are good people in their heart, but I just remember them telling me that they weren't going to vote for Barack Obama simply because it sounded like a Muslim name, or things like that. So we've had that sort of incredible hate, and it shouldn't surprise me, because again, I still have those Calvinistic presuppositions of depravity. I understand human depravity, and that's generally we're geared to go there. And as I said, we've went through that lately. This political rhetoric again. This is a year coming up. This is an election year, so we certainly got to hate each other again. So, but this is why we need these conversations, so we can look at and be reasonable and actually put in action our faith and do what we say we're going to do. And part of that is to have some understanding, try to understand the other, and it's a big part of it. uh, One other thing we can do, of course, is support grassroots initiatives. So providing support to grassroots peace initiatives and organizations working on the ground to, like you say, build bridges, roads, build communities, um, giving financial support, volunteering, giving to those efforts, making a tangible difference. Of course, humanitarian aid is always good. We can always do that. One of the things I hope we can do eventually, especially in our area, is sort of host some peace building workshops, like we're talking about, organizing some seminars or workshops on conflict resolution, peace building, helping to equip church members with the skills and knowledge needed to actually contribute to peace efforts. And part of that's what we've started. Again, that's why I'm glad we've had you on. We've had, of course, our really good friend Tiffany Sapp on, again, from the Unitarian Church. We don't all have to agree on our theological perspectives, but we can all agree that we want to see our communities come together rather than being ripped apart further and further. So I think one of the greatest things we could do toward Middle East peace is actually put into action what it looks like to model peace here in our communities. If we can't model peace here, how can we sit as an armchair quarterback and tell the Middle East how they should solve their problems? And that's really, I think, where we can do the most good is, give what we can, promote these efforts, do what we can to support them. But more than anything else, have sensitivity, humility, commit to this disposition of peace, like Mike is talking about, and again, doing that through practicing these things in our lives. So
Yes,
very important, and
it
appreciate you so much, Mike. And I know you're teaching and advocating that in your community where you are, your spheres of influence. We want to do that here where we are in the mountains of eastern Tennessee, and again, wherever that you may be located, the ones that we've had some sort of listening in on our conversation throughout the whole live broadcast, and we've got people represented from different areas of the country. So I hope that this can be helpful for you to hear these stories and to know that just know the necessity of the issues, and know that there are people that are suffering, but the only way to alleviate suffering is through this disposition of peace, and being, having awareness of where we are and where we can go. And I'm so thankful that we've had this time to have this conversation tonight. Appreciate you coming on, doing this for us. Anything you want to say in conclusion? I'll kind of give you the last word, and then we'll finish up.
Oh, well, that's great. Thank you, Jonathan, for your time. I appreciate it very much. I thought the graphic was well put together, by the way. So thank you for putting some time and effort into that. I will remind us that the Palestinian communities, especially the Palestinian Christian communities, they refer to themselves as the communities of the forgotten faithful. They see themselves as those that are just going unnoticed by international, supporters or people that should be looking at it, that they would think would have their back. I do truly believe in having a disposition of peace. And, another I'd like to add to what you had just shared is that in having a disposition of peace, we can learn to we can appreciate our differences. Just tonight's Hanukkah, and my wife and I, we had a Hanukkah oriented dinner. I went ahead, looked up some recipes. We lit a candle. We read through some verses. We talked around the table. She did let me know that she knew about Hanukkah before she met me, so I don't have to teach her everything. However, I asked her, I said, "What do you know about Hanukkah?" We started chatting at the table, and that's important to have a high regard for other people's faith, other people's traditions. We do know the Jewish religion. The very start was for them to live in a manner and to believe in a manner that would cause others to want to believe and live in a manner that honors God. And we see that in Deuteronomy chapter 4. So, might we as Christians, those that follow after Christ, take that encouragement as well to be those that cause others that to want to believe in God and to follow after God and to love God all the more. And we could be doing that in our, having that disposition of peace. One thing I might mention, next year at Blue Point Bible Church, we're looking to lean in on the 12 marks of new monasticism. It was Dietrich Bonhoeffer who said that it would be a new monasticism, not like the old monasticism, the monks going into the desert, but it would be a new monasticism that would cause the church to bring forth, and I'm going to paraphrase, to bring forth the healing of the nations, the church to truly be who we're called to be. And so I might encourage folks, go ahead and Google that 12 marks of new monasticism. Each month, we're going to hopefully work on methods to bring that to life in our church, because contrary to what churches have become, religious clubs, the church is called to be a school for conversion, to convert our minds and hearts to look like Jesus, and to display that to the world. So I might encourage folks to follow us in that effort as we journey in on 2024. And on the side of political engagement, because again, we can all do something. Churches for Middle East Peace, they actually have this really neat thing they've put together. It's a Advent ceasefire prayer chain. I have mine. I didn't bring it here this evening. However, I went ahead and prayed and put together my prayer chain. Some might remember that from your Bible school days, taping together and putting them all together on a chain. And then what you do during the season, every day of Advent, and they provide all these resources on their website. It's cmep.org or .com. And you go ahead and you print out these chain links, put them together every day, cut one off. It has a prayer and it has a QR code. And the QR code, if you know how to use them, what they'll do is they'll connect you to your local representatives. So if you click on it, you put in your address, it'll help you know who your local representatives are. And it almost, the site does all the work for you. It will literally call DC. DC calls your phone back. I've never talked to Congress before, so this has been a new adventure for me during this season. And I've been able to go ahead and call my local representatives and voice my opinion, namely regarding release of all hostages, Israeli and Palestinian hostages on both sides. And then, of course, a ceasefire and a call to end the occupation and end American support, particularly in regards to the occupation. So there's so much that we can be doing. And I pray that tonight we've just put some of these things in front of you. And I hope I've encouraged you that despite what we're seeing on the news, despite what we might be hearing from our neighbors, God is at work in the midst of all of this. And there's some people doing some beautiful things right there in the land. Thank you again, Jonathan, for your time. And I thank those that tuned in this evening. I hope that you were inspired a bit.
Thank you so much, Michael. That's all we have today on the Legion of Heretics podcast. I hope this conversation helps create further discussions and opportunities for exploration in your own faith and life. I also hope that we can put into practice the empathy and grace so needed in all of our communities. So thank you again, and we will catch everybody next time. Hope that everybody has a great week. Thank you so much.